Now, while the industrial sector more or less held its own after 1955, Ukrainian agriculture continued to be problematic and actually worsened. Of course, there were erratic weather conditions, insufficient capital investment. And as a result of this, there was a lot of agricultural experimentation, in particular Khrushchev. Khrushchev was determined to correct agricultural deficiencies. He had, during his rule, had come to the United States. He spoke before the United Nations, head of the Soviet delegation. Eisenhower was president of the United States at the time, and they gave him a tour, a mini tour of the United States, and they took him to, I believe it was Iowa, which is like pure, flat land with a lot of corn. And he saw the richness of all of this corn. Wow. This is now the solution to the agricultural problem in Ukraine. And among then he comes back, and among the experiments or the quote-unquote reforms, first of all, those old machine and tractor stations in 1958 were abolished in 1958. They proved to be impractical. They sold the equipment to the collective farms. But then there was an enormous increase in the areas planted with corn. So we have now the corn fever. Increased by 600% between 1953 and 1959. So that at the height of the so-called corn fever, by 1963, as much as 31% of Ukraine's arable land was planted with corn. Ukraine has to become far superior to Iowa. Now, overall, these experiments carried out by Khrushchev failed. He also tried to open up virgin lands that weren't really suitable to agriculture, as in Kazakhstan, neighboring Kazakhstan. The result of this yielded low quality results, crops, harvests. And since the corn that was sown in Ukraine, it was successful, by the way. They got a lot of corn. However, it was basically used for fodder to feed animals. What was the result? Severe food shortages, that is, for humans. Had enough to feed the animals, but now we didn't have enough to feed the humans. The situation actually became so critical that by 1963, the Soviet Union undertook the unprecedented act of importing grain from abroad. Now, you couldn't import it from the United States. This would be embarrassing. So where did they get the grain from? You guessed it. All of those mills out in British Columbia were supplying Soviet ships so that there wouldn't be starvation.